Dorian. Dorian presents himself as the most cultured of the death row convicts, a man who claims mastery through centuries of accumulated martial knowledge, artistic discipline, and battlefield experience. He constantly emphasizes that he has seen everything, learned every style worth learning, and refined himself beyond the limits of ordinary fighters. His confidence doesn't come from raw power, but from the belief that experience itself makes him unbeatable. That belief collapses the moment his opponents stop respecting his narrative. Dorian relies heavily on psychological warfare, hypnosis, hidden weapons, explosives, wires, and ambush tactics designed to destabilize his enemy before a real fight even begins.
You're not the man to give me the taste of defeat.
These methods allow him to maintain the illusion of control. As long as the battle is indirect, Dorian can pretend his mastery still matters. His true defeat begins when Doppo Orochi forces him into direct, unavoidable confrontation. Against fighters who have forged their bodies and techniques through brutal, honest training, Dorian's borrowed knowledge fails him. He can recite techniques, but he cannot withstand the consequences of real impact. When Doppo destroys him physically, the loss isn't just bodily. It exposes that Dorian's experience is a shallow imitation, not earned strength. The most brutal punishment comes afterward. Dorian's mind regresses into childlike behavior, endlessly drawing pictures and repeating simple routines. This is not random cruelty. It is a thematic execution. A man who built his identity on sophistication, mastery, and accumulated wisdom is stripped of adult consciousness itself. He doesn't get death. He doesn't get glory. He loses the very capacity to understand what he once claimed to be. Doyle. Doyle is the only death row convict whose idea of defeat is fundamentally internal. Unlike the others, he doesn't just want to be beaten. He wants to feel something real, even if that feeling is pain, fear, or irreversible loss. His combat style reflects this obsession. He willingly blinds himself, ruptures his own eardrums, and mutilates his body if it means gaining a psychological or tactical edge. To Doyle, self-harm is not weakness. It is proof that he is serious. This makes Doyle unpredictable, but also deeply unstable. He treats his body as expendable, believing that sacrificing senses and function elevates him above fighters who protect themselves. In his mind, anyone unwilling to permanently damage themselves for victory is fundamentally inferior.
Didn't you hear the alarm?
This leads him to escalate fights in grotesque ways, constantly pushing past the point where survival should matter. His defeat comes when this philosophy is mirrored back at him and exposed as empty. When faced with fighters who endure pain without destroying themselves, Doyle's sacrifices lose meaning. His blindness doesn't grant enlightenment. His deafness doesn't create resolve. His mutilation doesn't produce dominance. It only leaves him weaker, slower, and increasingly disconnected from reality. Doyle's final state is the cruelest inversion of his worldview. He survives, but as a man stripped of sensory experience, autonomy, and purpose. The pain he chased no longer proves anything. There is no audience, no validation, no battle left to escalate. He becomes a living example of the ultimate lie behind the convict's ideology. Self-destruction is not depth, and suffering alone does not create strength. Sikorsky. Sikorsky believes that pure physical ability, speed, grip strength, flexibility, and pain tolerance is enough to dominate any fight. Unlike the other convicts, he does not rely heavily on weapons or poisons. Instead, he treats his body as a tool refined specifically for killing. His climbing ability, finger strength, and joint flexibility allow him to move through environments in ways normal fighters cannot, giving him a constant positional advantage. What makes Sikorsky dangerous is also what makes him delusional. He assumes that because his body exceeds human norms, he exists on a higher tier than trained martial artists. This leads him to constantly test himself against multiple opponents, invade personal spaces, and provoke fights he believes he can physically overpower. His idea of strength is mechanical. If his body can do something yours cannot, then he has already won. This belief is dismantled piece by fighters who understand that raw physical traits mean nothing without combat discipline and intent. Characters like Baki and Gaia don't outmuscle Sikorsky. They dismantle him by controlling rhythm, space, and psychological pressure. Sikorsky is repeatedly humiliated not because he is weak, but because he cannot adapt once his physical advantages stop producing fear. His ultimate defeat is not a single moment, but a sustained erosion of identity. He is hunted, cornered, and psychologically broken, eventually reduced to a state where survival, not dominance, is his only concern. The man who once chased fights becomes someone who runs from them. For a convict who defined himself by overwhelming others with physical presence, being forced into fear is the most complete defeat possible. Speck. Speck is framed as one of the most dangerous, arguably the strongest, because he fights like someone who refuses to give you a fight at all. His entire approach is built around denying openings. He attacks from blind angles, uses sneak shots, escalates instantly, and even pulls a firearm, something no honorable fighter in this world respects. Speck's logic is simple. If the goal is victory, then fairness is just a weakness. That's why the person who defeats him has to be the exact opposite of that philosophy. Hanayama doesn't out-trick Speck. He doesn't counter-weapon him. He doesn't solve him with technique. Hanayama defeats Speck by being an immovable wall of front-facing, head-on strength, the kind of fighter who takes whatever you throw at him and keeps walking forward anyway. Speck can't create a moment where Hanayama hesitates, because Hanayama's whole identity is that he doesn't hesitate. The key detail is how the defeat happens. Speck keeps getting back up, and Hanayama keeps putting him down the same way. That repetition matters. Speck's worldview depends on the idea that there's always another option. Another tool, another dirty angle, another escalation. Hanayama deletes that belief by proving the outcome doesn't change even when Speck uses everything. It becomes a blunt message. You're not losing because you didn't try hard enough. You're losing because you're weaker. And because Speck genuinely loves fighting, his punishment is uniquely cruel. He reaches a point where he accepts death as the only real defeat. Yet he survives through medical intervention and ends up trapped in a coma-like state, alive but unable to fight again. So even after he finds the defeat he claims to want, he's denied the one thing he actually lives for, the act of fighting itself. Yanagi. Yanagi defines himself through poison and inevitability. Unlike the other convicts, he believes direct confrontation is unnecessary if death is already guaranteed. His vacuum palm, poisoned handshakes, and hidden blades allow him to kill after the fight ends, turning even survival into delayed execution. To Yanagi, this makes him superior, because once poison is inside you, the outcome is already decided. This mindset makes him dangerous, but fundamentally hollow. Yanagi avoids real exchanges and escalates only when risk to his own body is minimal. He doesn't test himself against opponents. He infects them. Victory for him is not dominance or proof, but certainty. That philosophy collapses when fighters refuse to accept delayed death as legitimate defeat. Against Baki, and later forces beyond his control, poison stops deciding the fight. Once Yanagi is physically overwhelmed, his identity disintegrates. Without distance, timing, or poison doing the work for him, he is helpless. His punishment is precise. Yanagi loses his hand, the source of his poison and his false inevitability, after his encounter with Motobi, leaving behind a man whose entire system of control is gone. That collapse is finalized when Yujiro Hanma severely injures him with a single strike. No poison, no delay, no manipulation of fate. Yanagi is knocked out instantly, proving that stripped down to his body alone, he was never strong enough to stand among real fighters.